I'm Vice President here at Farmers Business Network, also a farmer in Northern Illinois. I am a conventional farmer, and I'm still on that process of, is it time for me to switch to organic farming? But I'm going to go ahead and let the panel introduce themselves for you.
So my name's JP Ray. A few of you might have heard me and Bryce talk here recently at the Lunch and Learn. But my fifth generation family farm, farm with my brother in eastern Nebraska, just right north of here. We farm 10,000 acres and about 7,000 of that's organic, and we've been doing it for about 10 years.
So, Bryce Earlbeck, Manning, Iowa. Me and JP put this AgriSecure thing together, and it kind of gave me the confidence to expand in the organic too. So me and Dad went into the organic world a lot larger than we initially planned. So.
Brian Earlbeck from Manning, Iowa. Just got into transitional organic and getting into organic here now, so looking forward to it, and hopefully some other people here are too.
Hi, I'm Aaron Zimmerman. I farm in northeast Nebraska, 100% under irrigation. We work with AgriSecure. We are coming out of our first year of transition.
So the first question is why, and we're going to actually talk through the slides instead of presenting them, and then we'll have some open conversation. But if you think about the organic market, and I've chatted with these guys quite a bit. When you think about what the opportunity is, there's a couple key data points that we should all know that exist, and quite honestly, most people don't know these. If you think about growing and how big it is and how quickly it's growing, we've increased 350% since 2016. Growing
2006. That's a typo.
2006. Yeah, that'd be quick for 2 years. Growing 8 to 10% annually, 40 billion, and forecasted to reach 80 billion. Organics are now mainstream. 80% of households buy organic. 5% total food sales. So the one thing we always talk about as farmers is what is being asked for? What do the consumers want? Or millennials, the younger generation, are asking for organic food or byproducts, whether it's beef or poultry or anything, at a twice the rate of earlier generations. Any comments about just that opportunity? Anything else?
And I think the Dave Ross of Beck Seed, he has a really good slide that he shares is when people of the past generation, they wanted a big house and a big car and all that, and that's changing into a smaller house, smaller car, traveling more, experiencing more things, and eating better food. So he has a good slide on that if you ever get to listen to him from Beck Seeds.
I think another important thing is that we need to grow what the market wants. So when we got started, I've become a lot more of a fan of organics over time. But when I first got started, you just had to take a look at it and say, what does the consumer actually want? My preferences and the way I feel about things, maybe I do or don't eat organic. That's not quite as relevant to being in business and trying to grow what the market is demanding. And I think that's what sometimes you need to think about is put. Understand the differences between the way that you feel about something and the way that the market values it.
Yep. For me, it was similar, yet not. I'd always eaten organic myself and tried to make sure my family eats clean, but we were still farming the conventional way of doing it just because we just didn't know how to do it the other way. And so there was that barrier there. But finally, you start talking about what does the consumer want, with social media and everything now. I mean, this is a reality. We want, America wants to know where their food comes from start to finish, and they want it to be clean. And so we can either adapt as farmers or become antiquated. And so that's why I decided to change.
And a lot of it's being imported right now, so not down the road like we're going to run out or have too much organic. So I'm just looking at this as going to be a long-term investment and a long-term project for us.
Oh, that's an interesting question. So import. How much of this do we import today? What's the demand?
About half of organic corn's imported today, and about 3/4 of organic soybeans. Some of the small grains we're a little more self-sufficient in, but when you look at the predominant economic drivers of the system, just doing some supply and demand forecasting based off of poultry demand and growth and stuff like that, It seems really hard, even with a pretty substantial acreage increase, that we're going to put a dent in prices for 5 years plus, just because of the growth of the market.
And what we'll talk about is a little bit, these imports is, we're importing a large number, and that number's set, and you can be in the $8 range, and imports don't make sense anymore. So once we drop below $8, we have that natural barrier there that they would start buying more U.S. grain, so.
Yeah, do you want to speak? We're showing a graph here over the last 10 years or so where the price for organic corn versus conventional corn prices. And I know what's really interesting is I've learned more about this and thinking about this from a transitional standpoint is once you get to this point, the idea of contracting this corn is fundamentally different too, right? I mean, you have people asking for your total production. You have people asking for to contract early, maybe even multiple years worth early. So it's quite different, and it has a different type of stability versus what the markets are out there like. You want to talk a little bit about what it means, what it's
I
different?
noticed coming into it was, I'm used to, you contract bushels. And if you don't deliver on those bushels, you're gonna have to figure out a way to buy yourself out of those bushels. Well, this sector is completely different. I mean, you're looking at like an acre contract. How many acres of this crop are you gonna have? Say 160. Like, okay, what do you think it's gonna average? And then you tell them, and if you fall short, no big deal. It's so that, as far from a stress level, trying to plan a crop, that was very helpful. I like that.
And we've also looked at, we're gonna probably go out 4 or 5 years on our corn and price it already, just to know that we've got that income there, and just be safe.
And I'll give you, my marketing's done for the year. I sold my corn back in October for 2019. So I just have to focus on farming now. And it's a pretty big relief.
So let's talk about acre growth. JP, you talk about meeting the demand, the imports. Obviously, the demand is going to be there for the foreseeable future. Is this a fit? How do we meet the acre growth?
Yeah, so it was really interesting when we started doing these studies because there is an increase in organic corn acres today, for example, but if you kind of zoom out a little bit between 2008 and 2016, corn acres are about the same and soybean acres are a little bit down. And that's because as corn prices went up during that market jump and everything like that, actually a fair bit of organic acres came out of production. And what's left today, a lot of these acres, if you look, the average acres per farm, is 50 to 60 acres of these crops. And I'll tell you, the yields are about half the national average as well. So what we see is that, frankly, our competition is not the professional farmer. There's a lot of folks that are very we say cause-oriented around the organic concepts and stuff like that. And I think what we're excited about is professional farmers that can grow high productive good, healthy, high quality crops. We've got an opportunity where the market's demanding this, and frankly, there's not a lot of people stepping up to the challenge. Despite the high prices, we're excited about this because people aren't stepping up to the challenge, and it just further kind of reinforces that there's some insulation to this, and I'm not really scared that we're going to overproduce this market and everything's going to fall apart in 2 years.
That was one of my biggest concerns getting into this is, okay, if I'm thinking it, how many other people are thinking it? And how long is it going to take before this thing saturates out? And then I'm doing all this work for maybe 50 cents more a bushel. But when you start looking at the metrics and you hear stories like that, and I've looked hard from whether it's corn buyers, producers, I mean, you name it, anybody that would be halfway related to this sector, everybody echoes the same thing. That no, when you think about it, there's no way this thing's gonna saturate out and do what you're afraid of, so.
And you're not gonna jump in and out in 1 year, We're
Yeah.
not gonna go 1 year and then decide to
you're
change.
committed.
So you're gonna commit.
Yeah.
You don't jump in, this is an
Right.
all-in thing.
Yeah. And you don't have to start all in, but.
Well, and I think Aaron is a great example of this because Aaron eats organic at home, and not a lot of farmers, do that. Let's just be honest. Aaron's, knowing Aaron, he's extremely progressive-minded. and yet, like, it's taken him a long time to get on board with doing this. I mean, so, like, if anything, Aaron's almost a poster child of who you would think would be considering it. And it just, you know, until recently, it was just really something that, that he didn't push on.
Right, because even if you, I mean, if you have a system that, you know, the way we were doing it, I mean, yes, our yields were increasing, we were cutting the fat, we were getting more efficient, you know, our bushel per acre was increasing, and yet it seemed like no matter what we did, we were just always bumping up against this glass ceiling of profitability where it was just always just razor thin margin. It's like, guys, I do not want, you know, I talked to my brother and my dad, like, I don't want to live the rest of my life like this, just always just hitting that dead end. So that's why we, you know, one of the reasons why, I mean, yes, you know, what we talked about there with the way I live and everything, yeah, that was definitely an aspect to it, but I mean, it's got to make money, and this is.
So this is an icon of you a year ago before you started to make the decision.
Something like that. Except you see the motion of reading. Yeah, if it was a GIF, you would see that.
And the
So-
worst,
No, I was going to say, so I wanted to walk through these different issues. You guys walk me through the reasons why not, the major barriers to making that leap.
One is knowing what to do, knowing where to start, knowing where to get the papers filled out, what to do, what are you going to grow? Yeah, we grow corn and soybeans, but how are we going to start to get there? You just don't do that. So we needed a lot of help knowing where to go and what to do,
Yeah.
and what to raise and where to sell it.
Yeah, so look at the first one, production knowledge. Before you start talking about paperwork, transition period, certification, all the other issues, the first thing is production knowledge. You talked about adding crops, right? It's a different rotation.
Right.
Transition period. So let's talk about that a little bit. What does transition period look like?
yeah, the transition. The transition period gives you 2 years to think about your decision.
Yes, yes.
And
That's the engagement? Is that the engagement?
yeah.
Mandatory 2-year engagement.
Yeah, it is indeed.
And I've been and we've all been in Aaron's shoes too. Is you spend nights thinking about, is this the right decision? And you go to Google and you type in to find out all the numbers on organic, and you keep reassuring yourself it's a good fit. So during the transition period, you want to minimize the risk. You're probably going to lose money. We're going to be honest with you. You don't have to lose money, but being smart about it. And the transition period is really a time to learn without making too many mistakes.
And we're already breaking even or losing money to begin with right now, and it doesn't look good for a while. So transitioning right now, if you can break even or lose a little, you're not any further worse off than you were before.
You said it right there. I mean, that was part of the decision too. You know, we're looking at negative margins, break even at best anyway, so why the heck not? You know, as long as your banker's on board, which I know we're probably going to talk about that, but that's a big thing. And but you know, barriers to entry, you know, the transition period, it's tough. I mean, you're going to commit, and you need to stay committed because, you know, you're going to take some licks. We did. I came into it thinking, oh man, if we could just squeak out a near break even, and that way when we get to organic, we can hit the ground running. Well, that didn't exactly happen this year. We had a whole lot of alfalfa, new seeded, and this year was not conducive to growing alfalfa in our part of the country, and it was a bloodbath. And so, I mean, I told my brother, I said, we're committed now. We have to see this thing through because we know we're selling some quarters to make up for this little venture we decided to go on. But no, we're 100% vested, that's for sure. But.
No, I think, you know, I've talked to a couple of guys in the finance community that have said, like, how do you, you know, and I've asked them, like, how do you keep lending money to guys if the equity keeps eroding? And, you know, and they said, hey, look, we've got some guys that have lost money for 3 years. Some of those guys we're going to have to say no to, but some of them, the difference is the ones, you know, that we're going to continue to back are the ones that have a plan. The ones that have a plan to do things differently, the ones that have a plan to make changes that can get them onto a path to sustainable economics. You know, and organics is a really good option for that. It is a tough conversation to come in and say, look, we're going to lose a bunch of money the next 2 years, but there's a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, and it's going to be awesome.
Yep.
It's not an easy conversation, but I think, you know, with the proper planning and consideration and everything, you know, that's something that the banker can get excited about to understand that you're actually moving towards doing something different that can change the trajectory you're on.
You know, talking about bankers, you know, probably my dynamic is a little bit different because my banker was the one that kind of gave me the nudge to maybe look into it. He met this guy and then come to me and says, you know, you need to call this guy. They're doing some things that I think is right up your alley. And so I right away had the support of the bank because, yeah, and they said, he keeps reiterating when we talk about, the situation, he's like, we know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, so it just is what it is. Just grin and bear it, and it's going to be worth it when you get through.
And during the transition period, I think the biggest thing is you got to be honest about your management, what you can do, what things really cost. If you put $60 or 60 bushels into transition soybeans, it's not a good place to start because those type of things will catch you. And I tell you, just talking to a guy today, he goes, "Oh, I think I'm going to transition through soybeans." I said, "Just write the rent check and go away for a year. You'll be better off." And so you got to be honest with yourself on what things cost and how much management you can actually do when you add crops in. So.
And be able to look at different crops rather than corn and soybeans. We're gonna probably have 6 or 7 different ones this year, so it'll be different. Things I've never grown.
Just learning to set the combine has been
Yeah.
Our combine goes from about the end of June all the way to October, November.
I didn't say last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, till last week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
we had oats, we had rye, we got wheat, we have soybeans,
Peas.
corn, peas. So there's a lot of different settings and a lot of changing.
So we have a spectrum of not started, in transition, couple years in, been doing it for a long time. When was when did you become certain about it? And when did you have to get confidence, JP? You've been around the longest doing this. When did you realize, like, you don't have to forego 50% yield on corn? You can do these and set up rotations correctly.
Yeah, so for us, one of my themes that I've been saying here the last few days is I can't tell you how much I would have paid for AgriSecure to be there when I first got started because of how many mistakes we made. And so, we were kind of more on an island when we were getting started. We had some advice from some good friends that were kind of pointing us in the right direction. Bryce and Eric's out here that kind of helped us with that. But we were just kind of stumbling around in the dark. And so we started off pretty slow. I mean, we were doing alfalfa, and we just had somebody come up and ask us for organic alfalfa, and we're like, that's just silly, whatever. Then they told us what they wanted to pay us for it, and we're like, we're going to look into this. And then, and we started, we got everything certified. We did that, and we got a bunch of extra money for the same thing that we were doing. But then, when those alfalfa stands went out, we said, let's take a look at this corn thing. And I think what hit us is that this is when corn prices were getting high, and we screwed up and made a bunch of mistakes and grew like 120 bushel corn, and this is when corn was like $6, and we still made more money than any other field on our farm. And that was kind of the moment that was like,
$14.
It was $14 at the time, and we just that was just kind of the moment that, like, there's something here, there's something here. And so then we just pushed a little bit harder. And then it was 3 years ago, we just said, no, I mean, we understand this well enough. We understand the risk that we're taking. We got our arms around it. We know we're still going to make some mistakes, but we're ready to go all in. So, for us, it was 6 or 7 years before we really, kind of pushed all in. But, I think going back now, I think the biggest regret we have is we didn't go sooner. So.
Yeah. For us, we had gotten to the point where, let's see, rewind back to fall of 2017. We had the best corn crop we had ever had on our farm. I mean, by far. And yet, we were still looking at just barely squeaking a break even. And it's like, doggone it. And you couple that with what we were doing to, we go, within an hour radius around our farm doing custom spraying, combining, planting. We put drain tile in the ground for people. We cover 10,000 acres with that doggone sprayer, and we do all this stuff just to drag the dead leg of the farm, basically subsidizing it, And so those two things right there, at that point said, okay, we're going to do this.
And once you get start selling some of the corn and you see your returns, it does keep you motivated to keep going then.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember, JP, your first check. I was in your office, and you got the first check, and you showed it to your dad, and he looked at the back of it to make sure. I remember that.
is this real?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, the economic aspects of it are really positive. But like on our farm, we've always kind of believed in sustainability pretty strongly. We've had alfalfa, we've grown alfalfa for 80 years on our farm, and that's been a big part of what we've done. I look at it as a way that organics is a fantastic way to monetize an investment in sustainability and a belief in soil health. And we're working hard at it to get, I don't go into this saying, the people to challenge me and say like, oh, you're not gonna be able to feed the world with organics. And I say like, I don't know, look at our corn yields. We're pretty dang close to growing the same amount of corn organic as we can conventional. And we're doing it with a heck of a lot less inputs. And if we keep treating the soil the way that we are in conventional farming today, there's not gonna be soil left to feed the world. And so, I think that some of the things that we're doing, I think are really positive, for how we're going. I mean, not everybody, I'm not gonna stand here and be an advocate and say that everybody needs to go organic farming because it takes all types, but I think it is really positive for what we're doing. Done right, it can be really productive, and that's where, and I feel good about it. I really do. The economics are good, but I just feel good about what we're doing and how we're doing it and giving people that choice of what they want to eat.
You brought up a good point about being a fit. It's not for everyone. When people talk to you,
He just has to say that.
You gotta be about 1/2 bubble off plum to try this.
that's one way of putting it.
There's a large organic farmer in here, and I remember his dad saying, what's the keys to this success in organic? And he said, don't own a boat.
That's not funny.
So,
But, is there anything you want to say about, how to identify yourself as, a prospect for this, or if you're interested in this, where do you start, looking at your ground? Do you start with, do you suggest that you start with a certain field or certain track, high quality ground, those types of things? And obviously it's different for Illinois and Nebraska and different places, but.
yeah, I think you have to look at yourself, and you have to be willing to accept things don't work out sometimes. We got chicken manure the first year. It was a sloppy mess, and he was all mad because he's under fixing it, or a spreader. And I said, yeah, we're going to run into things like this, and we got to figure out how to solve them. You can't just sit there and get mad and think about it that way. And
Where were you when he was on?
He wasn't around.
I was watching it.
Yeah. When you don't say
I could just see him standing like 10 feet away, going, "It's gonna be fine."
So you gotta accept some failures and be able to think about things in a practical way and solve them, and not just rely on the co-op type of system to solve some of these problems. So.
Talk about the last one, market options. Again, you said you were out there trying to figure it out as you go. This is still a moving target in this space. What have you seen, and where do you think it goes? Is this one of the harder issues, or is this one of the easier things?
It's kind of easy and hard at the same time. I mean, like on corn, there's a pretty good sized market. There's a lot more clarity around market demand and need and options. There's a lot of options there. Some of the other crops are a little bit more challenging, and what we get ourselves into a little bit is this chicken and egg dilemma of, I can't grow corn every year, can't even grow corn and soybeans every year. I got to have some kind of small grain or some other crop in there. And yet there's this chicken and egg problem of what do I need to grow for the market, and what does the market want, and how do the food companies that want that stuff meet us, and how do we meet them? And then that's the part that's challenging. Your base core crops, I think it's fairly straightforward.
Right.
Especially, that's just not as hard. That can be done, and it's easy. Like Bryce said, I've had an offer on the table we're weighing now for a couple of months about marketing all of our corn for next year. And that's not something I'm stressing at all about, because even if I'm wrong by 50 cents, I'm still in a great place. So there's a lot less stress from that. If you're wrong by 50 cents on your conventional corn, that's the difference between making it and giving up the farm.
Right.
Yet there's also just a lot of struggle around some of the other crops. They're not as clear, not as transparent. Some of the companies are easier to deal with than others. So that's been one of our frustrations on that, is that's just been a lot of work there.
So you see all the Walmart, Fairway, all the other marketplaces, Whole Foods, they're all putting in organic, and they just don't switch for nothing. So they know there's going to be something going out there. We just need that in between people to get it from us to them, or that we can sell straight to them one way so that we can get that to market.
In a scalable way. That's the.
I think we take for granted on the conventional side how streamlined and efficient the whole grain movement system works, like getting grain from my farm to where it needs to be consumed. Like that just works, and that is just
Right.
slick and efficient, and it's just smooth and it operates well. And in organics, it's just a mess. And you just, not because it's a problem, it's just because the infrastructure isn't there. You don't have the elevator 5 miles away. You don't have the trains that move from here to there and all these kinds of things. The volumes are intermittent, and so.
And you're going to run into a lot of issues that are unavoidable with market options. To give you an example, last Friday, cleaned out the last 500 bushels of my bin. 4:30, sent the truck off. He's supposed to unload. Well, they rejected him at 4:30 on Friday. So I have 500 bushels sitting an hour and a half away. What do I do with it? And so you learn things really quick and how to solve them. Those part of the market options. There's a big learning curve on how to market this grain. Not actually in the money wise, but in how it's delivered, how the contract reads, and things like that. So.
I think utilization of bin storage is probably key in this sector, because like I said, I mean, you can't really chuck a rock and not hit an ethanol plant or a co-op somewhere to take, your regular number 2 yellow corn. But when you're talking I should really call it a specialty crop, but something, like organic, you're going to need to probably store it. I haven't found anything that can really take it necessarily straight out of the field, though there might be some options out there. So, but as far as marketing goes, we stumbled into an 80-acre piece of dry land that a landowner wanted to tear up from pasture and rent it out, and we just right place, right time. Well, we were able to certify that organic right out the bat. It only yielded like 150 bushel the acre, but we sold our corn for $9.45 picked up. I mean, that gives you a little bit of wiggle room to learn.
On the first year,
hard way.
no
Just a bit.
transition year?
Yeah, just a tidge.
Well, it's
yeah.
kind of this clean pasture.
That was clean
come back.
pasture, so
Yeah.
there was no transition. That was first year?
Yeah.
It wasn't a flex lease rent that you had
No,
there?
no flex. But I
Okay.
got a 5-year contract out of the deal, so we're gonna.
So look, I think when you asked about like what kind of person does it take, it's that kind of person that's willing to say like, look, am I really happy about 145 bushels? I don't like jump out of bed and jump for joy that I got that, but like I know I'm going to get better at it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna figure this out. I'm going to work through it, but I can live with the fact that I didn't knock it out of the park every single day, and I sleep well at night with that 945 check.
And I know there's potential there for the yield. So I mean, when I went into this thinking, okay, if we're used to that 180 to 200 bushel corn, I figured, man, if we could do 120 bushel corn, I'm still better off than I was. But since we started, I started an organic test plot because I figured all these hybrids that I've been using, well, all my information, that's gone. So I'm gonna start back over with all these different hybrids. And I found some. There was probably 3 or 4 hybrids that won that plot. Just a little bit of background. Very small plot, dry land, alfalfa, pretty tired alfalfa. It turned into grass largely, but we disked it up. Did the traditional rotary hoe, cultivate, yada yada, put some chicken litter on it. But top 4 hybrids did 280 plus. You can accidentally make money growing organic corn 280 plus.
That's what it feels like the first couple of years. You
Yeah.
accidentally make money.
Yeah. So,
You brought up a point about like high value. You'd rather do that. The thing that I find interesting, the concept I find interesting, anytime we're harvesting and we're moving lots of corn, and especially nowadays the prices aren't great, you move so much volume per truck at $3.50, $4, whatever it is, and you're paying the drying, you're paying the moving it, the storage, whatever it is, right? There's just a cost. It's the lowest per quantity that you move. It's the lowest value from a commodity corn standpoint. So when you're looking at a truck, you're moving a truck worth of $9 corn. All those other expenses, are cut by 2/3.
well, I look at it pretty simply. Like, the way we're doing it, we're playing in a saturated market. Everybody knows how to grow corn and do it really well. I mean, we're the best farmers in the world, and we got so good at it, we decided to teach the rest of the world how to grow it. So my thinking is, if you're going to play in that sector, you better be the most efficient, otherwise you're not going to make it. And that was just kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah.
This organic thing, thinking about the whole market scope of it, you're not going to see a bunch of 10,000 acre organic farms pop up overnight. That stuff just doesn't happen. It takes real skill and management to do 1,000+ acres.
And JP does it.
Yeah, and JP doesn't. He's got math though. So we got a long market run on this for a lot of reasons, and we're going to run into a lot more issues before we fulfill the market manure needs and things like that. Labor is simply probably not enough labor out there to meet the market demands of organic if you look at it.
So we've talked a lot about production and markets. Yeah.
Questions from the field?
Yeah, well, absolutely. We can do that.
So the question was nitrogen sources. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just asking what's your avenue for nitrogen? You know, if you're putting on feedlot manure, you're high in phos and trace minerals, reasonable on your nitrogen levels, but it sounds like chicken litter is maybe what you've been using or have access to. We don't have that, so I'm.
We use chicken litter and cover crops to try and gain that, peas and soybeans.
So the big thing is the rotation. You got to plan out a rotation, and I don't know where you're from, but if it's, let's say it's out west where you don't have the manure, the chicken manure like northwest Iowa where we're at, you got to really plan your rotation and understand that you might have to suffer some yields at the beginning of the years to get that rotation and soil functioning. But you can put 200 pounds of nitrogen into a soil through a cover crop. We've done it for the last 4 or 5 years on our farm. Eventually, we've reduced our nitrogen in half by having a full season cover crop after wheat before corn. And so you can use feedlot manure. We don't because it brings a lot of weed seed in. There's a lot of risks that come to it, and it doesn't provide much nitrogen. That's why we tend to go towards the chicken manure, and we do have it available, and it's easier to spread, and the cost of it is a lot. You can plan for that cost.
You're not hauling as much volume with chicken litter either.
Right.
Yeah, and that people have said that like, oh, we don't have any chicken litter near us. You can haul it a long ways.
Ways.
I hauled from middle Iowa, and I'm in northeast Nebraska. I hauled a long ways, and it was
We take a lot from Denver out to, not to you exactly, but
right.
it's
We
close
talked
to
about
you.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it just because of when you're applying the chicken litter, you're applying it for nitrogen value, and the value of nitrogen for an organic crop is really, really high.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just because we don't have other options. So, and chicken litter is pretty dry,
Yep.
you know, so you can actually get a dense amount. It's not like cattle manure that's mostly water. So you can actually haul chicken litter a really long ways for the value of the nitrogen. So,
You're talking dry pelletized chicken.
not
No.
pelletized.
That stuff's really hot, which
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is available, and it's going to be more expensive, obviously, than the raw chicken manure. But there is dry all around the country that can be moved in hopper bottoms and things like that. You're talking about 6% dry on that. So
Not every chicken barn is
Yeah.
built the same.
yeah.
No, I mean we've got some thinking we could spread it with a new liter spreader box, and it came and it was just mush. Blah. Like, well, that didn't work, so
No.
we had to get a different spreader in.
Be there when your first chicken
Yeah.
manure load comes, because they'll bring 30 at a time and dump them all, and you don't get to bring them back.
Yeah.
Any other questions out there?
JP, what's your experience with bean walking people and route for finding crews?
I wrote a really big check this
We,
year.
we try not to have weeds out there, but sometimes they come through.
Yeah, I mean, so my experience would be that a lot of money spent on walking crews is money wasted. This year we had some fields that I just would have been happier if we just would have tilled them under. We would have been in a better place at the end of the day. We've relied on a bean walking crew, which is an outfit that brings up a bunch of folks on the ACE2A program, ACE2A temporary worker program. We've had really good luck with them. It's expensive. And again, like walking crews, you're basically talking about, kind of rescue type operations. And so it's never an expense I'm really happy with. And I think our focus on weed control has generally got to be preventative. And that's where, I've been preaching here the last couple of weeks because I've been, shedding a few tears about some of our organic soybean yields. We had several fields that did great. We had one, that did upwards of 70. And at $24, that works. But the ones that did 20, the money that we spent on the walkers it was just wasted. Because I don't think the impact of the financial from being less than 20 we're gonna change the equation very much. So So, yeah, having access to a crew to kind of help out to rogue a few things is helpful. But if that's your primary weed control, you've already lost the battle.
What would you say that costs per acre to have bean walkers run over?
Some light touch, some light touch stuff can be $50 an acre. If you're really having to do heavy aggressive weed removal, it can be upwards of $250 an acre.
We've seen
And
up to
it's just
500.
it's just like, at that point, it's just like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
I would rather at that point, and this is where we have to think differently sometimes in organics about how we do things, because if you're thinking there late in the season and saying, well, I'm gonna plow this under, well, I'm not gonna get any revenue, and that's horrible. What we had to think about is like, how many weed seeds did we just put across that field?
Right.
And what's happening now is that I'm gonna have to go back into something like alfalfa to rescue the weed seed bank and get rid of it. And so now I'm not gonna be able to have organic corn on that field for 4 years probably. And so the little, trying to chase that, that little bit of, soybean income this year, I forego, good, big, strong profits on that corn for several years to come. And it's just, you can't be short-sighted like that. I'm just kicking myself like over and over and over again this winter. So.
Are any of you guys livestock producers also, or just grain farmers?
Yeah, we have a feedlot, a commercial feedlot as well. We use the cattle manure. We farm on some fairly hilly ground, and so we have a lot of like clay knobs, and we really push the cattle manure into those areas. It's more for fertility enhancement and soil health, because there's just not a lot of available nitrogen in that manure, so that's not really what it's helpful for. The other thing that I will strongly encourage you to do is get focused on composting that because of the weed seed that you'll bring in. I mean, that was another stupid mistake this year. We got an awful lot of buttonweeds in places that were perfectly clean fields a year ago, and the only thing we did was put cattle manure on it. We're going to get started on that. we will be now.
You've talked about the massive profits in the corn years, but you've also mentioned 6 or 7 crops that you're growing. So how many years can you actually grow corn? And what is your average profit level, say, over a 5-year period?
Yeah, so the major profit driver is the corn, but wheat, barley, peas, anyone else on anything?
Rye.
Rye. You could do in that $100 to $250 range. Peas a little bit more than that on the profit levels, if done right and done in the right rotation. And us as a family, we're going to do corn every 3rd year. We're not going to push it very hard. We'd rather be there in 10 years than to push corn every other year, corn on corn. Very difficult to keep the weeds down in that rotation, and you're going to start getting diseases in there. So realistically, you could do corn every other year. That would be, the certifiers would allow that as long as you had cover crops and things like that in there. But from a farmer standpoint, I'm looking every 3rd year.
See, and I think about it a little bit differently. We're going to be going a little bit more intensively on the corn, but then we're going to break out and go to alfalfa for like 3 years. And so we'll do corn 50% of the years in the non-alfalfa, and maybe even do a little bit of corn on corn. Maybe some short season in the 2nd year after a heavier cover crop, a multi-species, and planting a little bit later. But that alfalfa is what we're going to use as kind of our major like break the cycle.
So you kind of think of it as like your percentage of acres. You're always looking every year to have 50% of your acres in corn. The other 50% is then broken up between alfalfa and some other stuff.
I mean, yeah, that's kind
Give or
of like
take.
easy. That's a little, a little bit oversimplification, but just to give you an idea of how we're thinking about it. Yeah.
We don't have any livestock producers. Well, I mean, I don't grow any livestock, but we've got a lot of livestock producers around us. A couple dairies, a couple feedlots, so there's plenty of that. But like we talked about weeds, I've been hauling in chicken litter from Iowa or down in southern Nebraska and bypassing those guys. But this composting thing is something we've started trying this year as well with feedlot manure. So I think there's quite a bit of potential there. I think that burns off a lot of the end value in it when you compost. But you can use that on legume crops and whatnot and get all the other stuff without bringing a whole bunch of weeds with it. But I know it doesn't take care of all the weeds though. But it's a heck of a lot better. So.
Talk to other organic guys, they just sit there, they usually keep the livestock on the place to make mistakes, like a wheat field or.
That's not wrong.
Yeah.
That's not wrong.
Livestock, livestock works very well in organic rotation, but you got to manage it and do it at scale too. So we talk a lot about going and getting cow-calf pairs and doing this, but you start talking about a lot of money and a lot of work, and you're trying to do all the organic stuff too. So you just got to be honest and be true about what it's going to take to do that at a profitable level. So.
And we're working with a neighbor that has cattle, and he's using a lot of our cover crop acres to run cattle on now. Does all the fencing and bringing them and taking them, so that takes me out of the equation. Yeah,
Yep.
and then he pays us per acre. Yeah, and wins for him.
Well, that's the optimum way to make cover crops work.
Right,
Yep.
and then when it gets our manure right back on it, and we get the cover crop out of it, and then
Well,
the
and they're
manure.
growing nitrogen. That's part
Right,
of the
you
cash
get some
crop that
nitrogen
year
and-
is not having to buy fertility the
Yeah.
following year.
We need the cattle for the livestock byproduct to stimulate the rest of the ground with the cover crop usage. You're only getting 50% of the cover crop potentially if you're not using livestock. And that's an improvement.
Yeah, and we grow a lot of cover crops after small grain, so we have 6-7 foot tall cover crops you can't even walk through. And we just simply couldn't even take it down with a disc.
No.
That we had to have cattle come in and graze it, so.
We mow it down, but yeah, there's just so much there for the next year that it really helps to have the cattle on there.
We got a question in the back there?
Yeah, in a more big picture sense, I'm actually an ag teacher from central Nebraska, and one of the big lessons that a lot of ag teachers across the state are wanting to hone in on organic versus conventional farming. Now, as an ag educator, I would like to be as unbiased as possible, but I grew up from a conventional background. Now, what would you like to see in the classroom, or some facts that would be stated within the classroom to help see the other side that's not very well seen right now?
Well, I think it's a really good question. What I think is important is for everybody to take an objective perspective about it, and that's what's most important. When people start talking about conventional or organics, like the biggest thing that happens is we start to get an emotional debate about what's right and what's wrong. And to me, organic or conventional, one's not right, one's not wrong. It's that there's pros and cons to different types of systems. The main thing that I would, that I really advocate for strongly is getting healthier soil back going. I think that's one of the real positives organics, and that's how I got myself around it as a farmer. Is that we have healthy living soils that are doing more productive things. And that's what I think we would like to see, is just more people understanding the value of really good active biology in the soil. And a lot of conventional farming practices don't really encourage that. And I think that that's something that we got to understand those trade-offs really well. It's something that's in our adoption of technology in agriculture. An appreciation for that biology has been lost over the last generation, I think.
Even before we even thought about organics, we've been doing cover crops at least 10 years, and really heavy the last 5 even. That was even before we got into organic. So that part of it was really easy for me, and I really love cover crops, so that worked in for us.
And to answer your question, and how I look at it from a farmer point of view without the emotion behind it, is currently a conventional farmer produces 2 crops, so corn and number 2 yellow corn and soybeans, and the car goes of everybody else that's buying the crops. How easy is it to go buy number 2 yellow corn? They just, if you don't want to sell it, your neighbor's gonna want to sell it. And so I would want people to keep an open mind and get as many different avenues of, you have non-GMO, GMO, organic, specialty crops. So it's not, the farmer gains back a little bit of power because it's not just one massive system anymore that they can go get anything they want from. That we have more lanes to drive down and bring power back to the farms. So.
That's it.
Great, that's it. We've run out of time. We appreciate it. You guys come up, they'll make yourself available a little bit here, and then downstairs at the AgriSecure booth, you can come and chat a little bit more. So thank you very much for the time, and go to the next one.